Imagine standing at the altar. The church is silent. The candles flicker softly. People kneel in prayer. Everything feels normal. Everything feels familiar. And then, in a single moment, something happens that changes history forever. Not according to legends, not according to rumors, but according to a story that has survived for centuries and continues to spark debate even today. Stay with me until the very end, because what happened in a small church in Lanciano would eventually attract the attention of scientists, doctors, researchers, believers, and skeptics alike. And before this story ends, you may find yourself asking the same question millions of others have asked. What would I have believed if I had been there? Let's begin. Most people think miracles begin with certainty, but this one began with doubt. A doubt so human that almost everyone listening tonight can understand it, because every person experiences moments of uncertainty, moments when faith feels strong, and moments when questions appear, moments when belief feels effortless, and moments when the mind whispers, "Are you sure?" The priest at the center of this story understood those questions. He was not an outsider. He was not an enemy of faith. He was a man devoted to God. And yet, he struggled. Not with everything, but with one particular mystery. A mystery at the heart of Christian belief. And one day, while celebrating Mass, that struggle would become the beginning of an extraordinary story. Imagine being there. The service continues as usual. The congregation watches, prays, listens. Nothing suggests history is about to change. Then suddenly, something happens. Something so unexpected that those present reportedly stood frozen in disbelief. A moment that interrupted the ordinary. A moment that transformed uncertainty into astonishment. And perhaps that is why this story has endured. Because it begins in a way that feels deeply human. Not with confidence, with doubt, not with certainty, with questions. Questions many of us still carry today, and perhaps that is why people continue to return to Lanciano centuries later. Because the story begins exactly where many human hearts begin, with uncertainty. But what happened next is what makes this story impossible to ignore. Many stories disappear with time. This one did not. Generations passed. Empires rose and fell. The world changed. Technology transformed society. Yet the mystery remained. And eventually, modern science entered the conversation. That alone is fascinating, because most people assume faith and science always stand on opposite sides. Yet here they met at the same table. Researchers examined what had been preserved. Doctors studied what they found. Specialists asked questions, and the results attracted enormous attention. Why? Because some findings were unexpected. Unexpected enough that discussions continue to this day. Believers saw confirmation. Skeptics asked more questions. Scientists analyzed, and the mystery endured. But perhaps the most interesting part is not what was discovered. Perhaps the most interesting part is why people care. Because beneath every miracle story is a human story. A story about doubt. A story about longing. A story about wanting reassurance, wanting hope, wanting answers. Every generation searches for certainty. Every generation asks questions. Every generation wonders whether something exists beyond what we can measure. That is why this story survives. Because it touches a question that never disappears. What if there is more than we can see? If you enjoy exploring Christian mysteries, saint stories, miracles, and inspiring journeys of faith, subscribe now to Divine Stories. Every week we uncover extraordinary stories that continue to move hearts around the world. And tonight's story is far from over. Let's make this personal. Imagine you were standing inside that church, not reading about it, not hearing about it centuries later, standing there, watching events unfold with your own eyes. What would you think? Would you believe immediately? Would you question everything? Would you search for explanations? Would you tell others? Or would you spend the rest of your life trying to understand what you witnessed? This question fascinates people because it places us inside the story, and perhaps that is why the miracle of Lanciano remains so compelling. Not because it forces an answer, but because it invites reflection. Maybe the greatest mystery is not what happened. Maybe the greatest mystery is the human heart, its longing, its questions, its search for meaning, its desire for hope, because even today, people continue searching. Searching for reassurance, searching for truth, searching for peace. And perhaps stories like this endure because they remind us that questions are part of the journey. Even saints asked questions. Even priests struggled with doubt. And yet sometimes, the story does not end where doubt begins. Sometimes it begins there. Lord, for every person listening tonight, especially those carrying questions, bring peace. For those struggling with doubt, bring clarity. For those searching for hope, bring reassurance. Help us remember that faith is not the absence of questions. Faith is continuing to seek you through them. Strengthen those who feel uncertain, comfort those who feel discouraged, and guide every searching heart toward truth, wisdom, and peace. Amen. Thank you for staying until the end. Now I want to hear from you. If you had been standing inside that church in Lanciano, what would you have believed? Would you have been convinced? Would you have searched for another explanation? Or would you still be undecided? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and your perspective may help someone else think about this story in a completely new way. Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and keep your heart open to wonder.